Okay, good morning, everybody. I'll call the meeting to order. I think we have all commissioners present, but I haven't seen Brad, so maybe he.
I'm here.
Okay, so let's see. Welcome to all of our guests. Janelle, could you go through the virtual meeting guidance, please?
Of course. Good morning, commissioners, members of the public and staff. To help us have a smooth meeting, I'm going to review just a few decorum rules for all. Number 1, please ensure your mic is muted unless you are speaking. Number 2, please state your name before speaking. Number 3, in general, please have your cameras on if possible. If you're speaking, you may turn your cameras off if you're experiencing technological challenges. And number 4, as a reminder, the public chat has been disabled, but you can still send messages to the host if need be, and the meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. Thank you, everyone. Let's have a great meeting.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. That will take us to announcements. Michael, did you have any?
I don't have any announcements this morning.
Okay. Anyone else have any announcements? No? Okay, what I want to do is, I think Sarah has to leave early, or maybe not early, depending on how quick the meeting gets over, but we will move item 4C to the top of topics. And then we'll also be removing from the agenda item 4A that's not right yet for action. So that basically means we'll do C and then B. Is everybody okay with that?
Sounds good. Thanks, Tom.
Sounds good.
Okay, I don't see any objections. Okay, so
Commissioner Pavel, sorry,
yes.
I think I might have an announcement. Michael, is this where you want me to make my announcement?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. My announcement in advance of the agenda session that we'll be talking about later is just a transition, but hopefully a positive and one that won't make much of a difference, which is to say, I was originally appointed to the commission by the city of Madison in 2015 when we started our new commission structure by Mayor Soglin. I'd subsequently reappointed to the commission by Mayor Rhodes Conway. And in the meantime, I moved to Middleton. So with our recent resignation of our fellow Commissioner Mary Swanson from Middleton, I'm pleased to report that the Dane County Cities and Villages Association has appointed me to serve as one of their commission appointees for the Dane County Cities and Villages Association. So I'm pleased to continue to stay on the commission in that capacity. And the Mayor of Madison will be appointing a subsequent replacement for me as the City of Madison appointee.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sarah, and nice to have you continue with the commission. And then we still have the one open seat. We'll see how long it will take for Madison to fill that. They're usually pretty quick, though. Okay, Catherine, you're going to introduce the artists in residence.
Hi, good morning, commissioners. Thanks for having me on today. I want to introduce our the district's very first artist in residence, Nipinet Landsem. Nipinet is a Michif, Anishinaabe, and mixed European descent indigiqueer tattoo artist and illustrator working in Tejope. They are one of the owners of Gege, which is a community-focused tattoo collective on Willie Street. Their art focuses on intersections of identity, culture, and the natural world. They are descendant of Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa and Red River Métis settlement, grew up outside of St. Paul, Minnesota, and have lived in Madison for 6 years now. Nipinet is not only an accomplished illustrator, which you can see on their website, but also an organizer who has mobilized, the community for protecting water resources on numerous occasions. There were so many amazing applicants we got for this position, but Nipinet's application really stood out to the selection panel because of their commitment to community. So given that Shop 1 and this residency is all about engaging and empowering water stewards, stimulating water connections, I really couldn't see a better fit. We're very excited to see the residency kick off here. And over the course of the year, nipinet has planned a series of dialogues in or around Shop 1 and that really bring in the One Water theme and focus on 3 to 5 specific communities. At those dialogues, they're going to be facilitated and nipinet will be producing a large-scale illustration that sums up and synthesizes the conversation. From those illustrations, there will be small zines, like if you imagined a little booklet that breaks out the illustration elements and really brings in the dialogue participants' own voices into that. So it should be a really interesting and new kind of way for the district to hear from folks in the service area about their own connections to water. So I'm sure there will be a future opportunity for sharing some of these events and illustrations at a future commission meeting. But until then, definitely keep your eyes peeled on your email as we organize these events. I'm sure we'll send invites your way. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Catherine. Welcome, nipinet, to the district, and being the first one in this position, you get to kind of set the tone. Okay, we'll move on to any appearances by the public. Okay. Let's see, Mike or Tom was waving his hand. Congratulations. Okay, so we'll move to the consent calendar where we have the minutes of the last meeting in January 27th, cash statement, capital projects fund. Then we have 4 reconstruction projects for sanitary sewer extensions. And then review of bids and award of purchase of rotary lobe pump purchases. And then 2021 fleet vehicle purchases, followed by reviewing proposals to award a contract for the Oracle WAM support services with a 2-year additional option. Okay, do we have any questions on any of those many items before we get a motion? Grant, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks. And I'm sorry if one of those was pulled out of there, but I guess on the fleet vehicle one, I don't know if you want to just take it off the consent agenda, or I don't have any issues with it and I'll support it, but just wanted to, I guess, mention, we talked a little bit about it in the past, but it'd be great to at least talk about options for hybrid or electric vehicles. They may not be good fits for these purchases, but I know that's a small energy use compared to overall energy use, but it'd be great to just start thinking about what our fleet management plans are to kind of convert over to other fuel sources. So I guess that's just a comment I can throw in there and we don't have to take it off.
Okay, so you had first suggested possibly separating it, but now are you?
Yeah, I just kind of threw my comment in there, so unless other folks want to talk.
Okay. Well, maybe what we'll do is we'll ask Michael to put that on the future agenda, the hybrid or electric fleet vehicle discussion. And I know more and more trucks are now becoming, heavy duty, more heavy duty are becoming electric. So I think maybe that's the way to handle it, with Ford coming out with their new truck and others. So, okay, so why don't we do that?
Thank you.
Yep. So we'll continue with the consent calendar. I don't see anybody else moving to have any questions. So we'll have a motion to approve the consent calendar items A through F.
It's Wilson. I'll move approval of the items on the consent calendar as presented.
Okay, a motion by Commissioner Wilson,
Clark, I'll second that.
second by Commissioner Clark to approve the consent calendar items A through F. All those in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed? None. Okay, motion carries. Okay, so as I mentioned at the top of the meeting, we'll move to item 4C, and then we'll take up item 4B because we removed item 4A. Sarah, do you want to lead off the discussion on item 4C, please? The Commission Subcommittee update on CED performance review process.
I do, and thank you all for taking this item out of order. As you can tell, I am not moving in my car, but I do have a meeting scheduled at 9, so I'm sitting outside of my 9 o'clock meeting so I can stay with you as long as possible. Really an update on process for the CED Subcommittee CED Performance Review Subcommittee, whatever we want to call ourselves, some version of those words put together, which includes me and Commissioner Meyer and Commissioner Foster. We've been working together on this process, as you all probably remember, for over a year now, and really trying to suss out, I would say, one of the learnings that we've had as we've undertaken this new performance review process over the last few years, which really kicked off, for some of you, you'll remember when Commissioner Meyer and Commissioner James kicked off this new process quite a few years ago, trying to evaluate how it's been working, what's been successful, what hasn't been successful, and how we make those tweaks to the process over time to make sure that we're getting the most out of it. And one of the takeaways that we brought to you all last year in our process was really an observation that we seemed to be in some ways conflating in our CED performance review process the CED's performance as an individual performance monitoring mechanism and organizational performance monitoring, particularly with regard to our strategic plan pillar around employee relations, employee engagement. So it was our desire to make sure that we had robust processes as a district, particularly leaning on district leadership, the executive team, to make sure that we are doing the right, robust types of district and organizational performance monitoring, and separately, yet of course relatedly, monitoring the performance of our chief engineer and director. So all of that to say, we still feel like as a subcommittee, we are in a bit of a transition year because we have charged the executive team, the CED in particular, with building out those district performance review and monitoring pillars of the strategic plan in particular, and putting into place more processes like an employee engagement survey that would be reported on to the commission regularly. So we would have monitoring in place for that particular piece, more robust and frankly, I think more organizationally appropriate roles for that. So as we're in the interim year and they're building that out, we wanted to make sure that we were still doing a good job as a commission of monitoring both employee performance and to some degree district performance. So as an interim step, we are proposing to you all today that we ask the CED to perform his own 360 review this year. So go out and solicit feedback from direct reports and the ELC and report back on that to us as a subcommittee and then us as a commission as a whole as part of his own self-assessment. In conversations with Michael about that, he's decided to retain an independent executive coach to conduct that review confidentially, which I think is a positive step. And we also, excuse me, in this interim year, proposed that the subcommittee would still meet with the ELC to gain some broader organizational feedback from the ELC, while the CED's performance coach would be meeting with the ELC to get more of that individual performance review feedback and would report on that with the feedback from the direct report. So part of this is just a resource constraint and trying to figure out what we want our process to look like moving forward rather than having the committee conduct that 360 review ourselves. And part of it is to say, is it appropriate for us to be doing a 360 review every year? Is that necessary? And is that the right process moving forward? And I don't think we have a firm answer to that question yet. but we want to build out a process so that we can come back to you as a subcommittee, this time next year, at the end of this year, and say, this is how we recommend we update our policies and procedures to reflect a updated employee review monitoring process. So what we're thinking in terms of timeline is that we would be back to you all sometime in the end of the first quarter with the performance review, at least at a high level, from the CED as self-review, get your feedback on CED performance in the first quarter. Sometime in the second quarter, we would get the feedback from Michael's own kind of internal self-assessment, the more robust one, and then report back on you, as our traditional process would be, to look at employee performance and any requisite salary adjustments, which I don't think are eligible, but still something that we would look at periodically, just like we would every year. So that would all be happening kind of on the pillar of performance monitoring. And at the same time, as I alluded to, staff is taking a much more robust look at organizational performance monitoring. So we have scheduled our first really deep dive into strategic plan and more robust monitoring reports on our performance areas in a study session in March. And I'll let Michael give you all an update on that when we're done talking about employee performance monitoring. But we really see these as parallel tracks, again, related, but trying to separate them appropriately. So with that, maybe I will pause on the employee CED review process update, the somewhat significant change, at least for this interim year, being that we would not, we're proposing that we as a subcommittee would not ourselves conduct the 360 review of the chief engineer and director. And we would report to you all on a self-report out of that process. Michael, any questions, feedback?
Looks like Tom has a question.
Commissioner Wilson.
Tom?
Of course. Thank you. I just want to thank you guys for thinking about this and doing this work. That's some great thoughts and some great ideas. Just a couple of my thoughts and maybe a question. So first, I don't know that we need to do a 360 review of the CED every year either. However, I think it's not a terrible idea to keep doing it because it keeps our kind of finger on the pulse of what's happening just in general, really. And also because it allows us to see problems that may be occurring that otherwise, if we wait even a couple of years, sometimes things get away from you a little quicker than you think. And Michael, this is nothing against you because nothing gets away from you. But it just seems that I think we should keep doing it. I guess, having said that, the second question is, so it sounds like what you're saying is not a bad idea, almost like a self-evaluation of Michael, and it's a 360 self-evaluation. Again, not a bad idea at all. Thank you. But he would hire a consultant to do that. Okay, so the question becomes, like, who or what entity might that be? Of course, there's got to be some independence in figuring it out and who it might be, but just wondering who does that? Can somebody help me with that?
So I will say, we charged Michael with doing it himself as a subcommittee, or we proposed that and said we were going to report that to you. And then it was his initiative to say that he wanted to do that through a coach. So Michael, maybe let me turn it to you to comment on that particular piece of Commissioner Wilson's question.
Yeah, there are consultants with expertise in this area. They're called executive coaches, and their expertise is in the area of surfacing issues in a safe and open way that really provides very productive feedback. And for me, and CEOs use these processes all the time. Actually, we're using them within the organization with other work groups. And the process is, general surveys and then doing focused discussions with employees, directly with executive team members, and then with the ELC. The issues that emerge are shared with me directly, and then I work with the executive coach on developing an action plan, and then I circle back, and then I am able to share that action plan with the people who are part of the process, and also with the commission, which brings a lot more accountability into the feedback process, and I get valuable input in the process, and it's really, the focus is on growth and development, not what I would call evaluation.
Okay, and
that's what
so
that
then
process
we
is.
would look at that action plan and revise it, approve it, whatever we need to do with what's recommended by the work between you and a consultant. Is that
That is
so?
correct.
It's kind of your self-evaluation. Here's what was recognized by this person. Here's what I'm going to do, and then we add on to that other things that we may have that need to be
yes.
worked on as well. Okay, and I understand that whole process, and I'm aware that exists, but like what firms might be doing this in our area? And this may be just for anybody, not just you. I'm just curious as to, is this like a Virtua Kraus thing? Is this, is this an engineer, like an MSA group that does this? Who would do something like you're talking about here?
Usually it's consultants who do organizational development, and have that level of expertise. So usually very process focused individuals. I'm hiring DJ Rogers to do this work on my behalf. Many times they don't come out of big firms. These are folks that do this work in their own practice. They're management consultants. That's another way to call them. They're just pure management consultants, and they know how to get information.
That's very helpful, Michael. Thank you. That's great. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thanks, Tom. We have Grant and then Beth.
Thanks, and thanks for the great summary, Sarah. I just wanted to add on, I think it was this last summer, several of us, along with Michael and other sort of key staff, participated in some coaching around sort of policy governance, which is, sort of our underlying framework of kind of how we're supposed to be operating as a commission. I think that some of that, hopefully will come out in that discussion when we're reviewing the strategic plan. It's probably worth its own topic as well, or study session for us as a commission to kind of review how that's supposed to work, how it's working today. I think, so part of our desire to kind of move towards this separation that Sarah was describing is perhaps being a little bit more faithful to that approach, or even something like that approach, and just getting better definition around, as Sarah said, our role as a commission. And so clearly we have accountability for CED performance. I don't think there's any questions about that, but at least in the framework of policy governance, the concept is to have very clearly identified sort of performance measures that the CED is accountable for, and that's what we're reviewing. So there's a lot of work, I guess I'll just say, that needs to happen there. We really need to update both our policies as well as our performance monitoring. So something like Sarah mentioned, we don't really have a great tool in place right now where the commission is getting regular updates around employee satisfaction. And so we've kind of used the CED performance process as a way to get a finger on the pulse of, hey, how are people feeling generally about working at the district, which maybe isn't really exactly about, and it isn't about CED performance per se. And so that's really the primary driver, is trying to pull those things apart. One other key thing worth mentioning is, we have a policy on, I think it's called executive limitations, which, is really these are bad things you shouldn't do. It's not really a great tool to monitor overall performance. It's just really setting sort of boundaries. And that's another area where we don't have, not just for the CED, but in general, we don't have a good confidential sort of reporting mechanism in place for the district. So that's something that that came up last year, that's on the list of things that are hopefully going to get worked on this year, through HR or wherever's appropriate. But that's another example of something that, once that stood up, I think that's something that can give the commission more confidence that we're not missing something, right? There's not some underlying significant issue that's kind of churning away that we have no transparency on, that we have at least some good anonymous mechanism where things could be reported and looked into outside of any annual review process. So just wanted to mention those things to fill out the discussion a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Grant. Beth?
I just wanted to kind of echo a bit what other people have said. I think the subcommittee is doing excellent work. I really am pleased to see, even looking at the overall process and what we could improve. And I also think it's a great idea to call in a consultant, an outside group to evaluate the process, and a coach. I'm 100% for that. And I'm just wondering if maybe it might help the commission if that group, whoever the coach or consultant is, could present to the commission a short little, introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the process, so that people are real familiar with it and okay with it. I personally have worked with a coach in the past, and I know that they're really helpful. So I applaud this whole effort.
Thanks, Commissioner Bookland. That's a really good idea. We planned to come back to the commission with an update on the feedback that was received, and it may make good sense. We can work with Michael to figure out how we could potentially include the coach and the governance experts in that process. I think that's a really great point. The other and next part of my agenda item was to ask if anyone wanted to join our subcommittee this year. So I'll just put that out there so you can start thinking in the back of your heads if anyone is interested in diving into this with us. We think it might be helpful to bring someone else in for the subcommittee's work for a little bit of overlap and continuity. We've rolled people on and off over the past couple of years with overlap, and it's been a very successful model. Grant, you had your hand up. Did you want to chime in there?
I just wanted to make sure we raised that same point. And it's one of the other benefits of bringing in some outside help. Honestly, is the last couple of years, the sub group happily did put in quite a bit of time, and so to the degree that this, I think this can be a real relief for that, and make it a little bit more sustainable of an exercise moving forward as well. And yes, really, if there's somebody that's at all interested, please reach out, and it'd be great to add another person to that group.
Yeah, if anyone wants to jump in right now, please do not hold back. But also, no, you can feel free to follow up with me if you'd like to, if you want to think about it and then decide whether or not to join us, or even have a conversation about what the time commitment might look like. I'd be happy to talk to anyone about that.
Sarah, I'd be interested in joining that group.
Fabulous, Commissioner Bookland. I was hoping you might say so. Wonderful. We would love to have you.
Great.
Great. Thank you, Beth.
Okay, anyone else interested? If you don't have to make your mind up today, you can make it up later. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of summarize what's occurring here. Michael's going to do his own assessment. And then Michael is going to be engaging an independent third party who is going to do a review by contacting, but you called it, it's still the 360 review, correct? So it's going to be with the directors. Is he going to be doing are they going to be reaching out to the communities?
No, I was going to make that slight modification. It's probably a 180 review this year. So it'll be an internal. We'll
Okay.
focus there. So.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So that's what I was interested in. Okay, that's fine. That's fine with me because we do touch base typically in September with the customer committee, at least the cities and villages, and I think you have more regular contact with Madison. And then there'll be an employee survey as well. I think, is that what Michael had talked about? And is that going to be focused on him or on the district performance or combination, or?
It'll be mostly on organizational health and well-being.
Okay.
Sarah, Commissioner Eskridge calls this the 3 buckets, and the 1 bucket is organizational health and well-being, and we'll be working with the ELC on helping to formulate those questions, and they'll be based on standards, so we have good data to compare ourselves to other organizations.
Okay, so it's how the organization functions and fits and everything. Okay, and Tom, you have your hand up?
Yes, I do, and I'm going to lower it now. I'm going to channel my inner Jim Martin, and I'm going to ask, so what does this cost us?
The organizational survey itself may not cost us much at all. There are many survey instruments out there, such as the Q12 and others that are utilized that we can just, that Mike Lipsky can administer anonymously himself. And depending on what comes out of that, we would likely use some of a facilitator for group discussions, and those are it's pretty low cost, in the thousands of dollars, not in the tens of thousands necessarily, to do this type of a survey instrument. But we'll also be making sure that it's anonymous and independent, so we'll have to work through that, but we do have budget for it.
And then
Michael,
what
this might be a
about,
helpful time for you to give the update on, sorry, I think Commissioner Hubble is maybe going to say what about the executive coach, but so maybe that in your answer as well, but about the meeting that we're going to be having in February to talk a little bit. We know there's a lot more to discuss on this organizational monitoring and the pillars of our strategic plan and district monitoring. So there is a study session scheduled in March that you were going to preview. Might be helpful to do that.
okay, yeah. And then
And
what
just to
about
get
the
to
cost? Michael, do you have any?
Go
do you have
ahead.
any-
The cost for the executive coach will
Yeah.
be up to $15,000.
Okay, I have one. Do you see that as an annual occurrence or just kind of once every few years? The executive coach.
I don't have an opinion on that. That'll be up to the subgroup and the commission on what they think would be valuable. I think that hasn't been decided at this point.
Okay, we can evaluate that during after this year and see how it went and if we get the value out of it or not. Okay. Anybody else? So Michael, you're okay with the process that Sarah and the subcommittee laid out, and I want to thank them for all their work on this, and that Beth will be joining them, and I think then we'll have kind of a possible transition. We'll see if anybody else in the future, by the second quarter wishes to move in and move others out. So we all take our share of time in the evaluation process. Okay, I don't see anybody else. Ezra, you didn't have anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm glad this is moving in the direction it is. And I'm glad Beth is going to join us. I think that's great from a sort of continuity standpoint. And I think I've probably been at this somewhere between 5 and 7 straight years. I'm happy to sort of see this transition through. I was just telling Sarah yesterday, but I'm not sure I want to keep it up every year for the rest of eternity. And so some transition and handoff that way is really great from a very personal, selfish standpoint, but also I think for everyone on commission to sort of rotate through and have some chance to be a part of this process is really valuable. So glad all the way around on that development. Thank you, Beth.
Okay, well, thank you all. So that concludes item 4C, and then we'll move to item 4B, which is to accept the 2020 Energy Management Master Plan. Matt Seib, you're going to lead this off.
Yes, well, good morning, commissioners. Janelle, do I have to share my screen? Do you do that?
You do, Matt.
All right. Bear with me for one moment while I get this pulled up. All right, is my presentation coming in?
Good, Matt. Thank you.
Looking good, Matt.
All right, great. So, well, again, good morning, commissioners. I'm Matt Seib, process and research engineer here, and I'm coming back to you this morning to talk about the last step of the Energy Management Master Plan, which is to accept the plan. So very quickly, what we're trying to do here today, what's the purpose? We're here to accept the plan. The project has been completed and we need to have it formally accepted. Before we get into that, kind of what we're going to talk about here this morning first is doing a little deeper background, going back to the 2014 energy roadmap that we did and providing some context for what the district has been doing over the last 8 years or so. And then using that to provide a deeper level of insight into what the 2020 Energy Management Master Plan was about. And then we'll explain what the next steps should look like after today. So next, I'm going to hand things over to Alan Grooms, who's going to explain the background of the 2014 study.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm Alan Grooms, operations manager here at the district, and I was in Matt's role as the project manager of the 2014 Energy Baseline and Optimization Roadmap Study. There's a few of you that were here for that. There's probably several others that have made themselves familiar with that study, but just to kind of refresh kind of some of the focus on that, large part that study was looking at, focused on looking at the path towards an energy independent as a for the district as a high level focus, and specifically the Nine Springs plant is kind of the first focus for that. And so there was a lot of looking at is it possible, at that point in time there was a lot of talk about could we be energy neutral or even energy positive and export energy, or what is the potential for that. So it was really kind of an exploratory kind of study in that regard. It was intended to look at what we would need to do with our existing facilities and what those upgrade paths would look like going forward. It wasn't necessarily really envisioning direct actionable projects per se coming out of that project as a high level planning. And one part of that component, a reason for that is we didn't take a look at the biosolids at all. The 11th edition was just starting to come online at that point of the study, that we were in the meat of that study. So we didn't really feel like we had a good handle on what was going to shake out of the 11th edition. So we kind of intentionally allowed that to be excluded from there. We were really more focused on broader paths and how could we get to maybe an energy independent future. And the outcomes of that study weren't terribly surprising. As many of you probably know, we offset about 30 to 35% of our total energy used at Nine Springs via biogas generated energy that's burned in the engine generators and the engine blower, and the heat energy that's recuperated off those and recovered, that therm, the offset of that therm, the natural gas we would have purchased to do that. So that amounts to about 30 to 35% of our total energy. It can vary a lot depending on what else is going on. Is it a high flow year? we're overall using more energy, but we may not be generating more. So those kind of things factor into that variance and that percentage. Equipment being down is another big one. But what we discovered, and it was probably a credit to the organizational culture and just where we'd been over many years, was there wasn't a lot of low-hanging fruit. And anecdotally, in the last 10 years, you've got a lot of these organizations, they make the news stories, hey, if you recover biogas and generate, you could use that to generate energy and offset a lot of energy. And I've sometimes been frankly, a little surprised at some of the sized utilities that come out with this, like this is a big revelation, because at the district, we've been quietly doing this kind of stuff since the 30s. And so for us, it's kind of like, well, yeah, how can we do it better? And so because of all the years of doing that, and a lot of people really forward thinking about how to make use of that potential energy, there wasn't a lot of low-hanging fruit to be had. And so, in one way that was disappointing. You'd like to have a big project to put your, to stick on the wall or to show a big win. But in many respects, we've been enjoying the fruits of those small wins over time for many years prior to this study. And so it kind of really reaffirmed that we were on the right path already. And so that exploration of what could go forward. Next slide, please, Matt. And so coming out of that study, there were several main items of focus. I'm just going to touch on them briefly here. The aeration, the blowers and diffusers, that system is, that's a lot of our base energy to the plant, just aerating the microorganisms, mixing the tanks. That, those systems are 30 plus years old, some of them considerably older than that. And we've done a good job taking care of them, extending their life, but it's kind of time to start looking at more energy efficient equipment, stuff that's more easily supported. And so that's a project that has led to liquid processing improvements phase 2, which is just starting to really get rolling. So that, the outtake of that study in that regard is right now starting to move forward. The biogas and heat, we kind of intentionally excluded a lot of that from the 2014 study, other than to the extent of how much more energy could we potentially make from that. That's obviously a big focus for the 2020 study that is the focus of this presentation, the overall presentation and the ultimate request from the commission. VFDs, there was twofold on that, looking at, we do a lot of pumping here at the district. One aspect of that was, could we use more VFDs in the plant? Yes, the answer is yes, we could probably save some energy with that, but the incremental cost to do it, because of the amount, what we would have to do, that made more sense to implement as projects came on. And so that's kind of the outtake of that, was to move that to where it made sense, where we're already doing replacements. The other aspect of the VFDs is out in the pump stations, the collection system. And so those are, as we're doing rehabilitations to the pump stations, those improvements are being made as we go. So most of our major stations already have rolled to that at this point. So that's been something that's gradually evolving, that this study, kept saying, it's like, yep, keep going on that path. That's a good path. Infiltration inflow, that's a very hard one. It's an important one, but it's very hard to really make good traction on that. You love to, I shouldn't say love, those 10 gallon a minute leaks, a hole in the pipe in the collection system, that's a big win. I mean, you can go in there and cost it, you get a lot of bang for your buck doing that. Unfortunately, a lot of our I&I, it's a reasonably tight system as it stands. It's just such an extensive system that it does still result in a lot. And so we're chasing trickles and intermittent leaks and things like that. And so that's been a big focus of the collection system engineer and the engineering department as a whole. And I think we're making inroads on that as well. But that's a focus coming out of this study. And then lighting in general, and we've made some lighting improvements throughout the plant and the collection systems. Next slide, Matt, please. So the big takeaways, I would say, from the 2014 study, we had our major principles, and some of these are principles for the district, but it reaffirms some of the principles for us. Priorities are to protect the public health and the environment, keep our costs down, try and be cognizant of reducing our contribution to climate change. And that could be, a primary focus when you start talking, an energy study is, how much energy you're using, what is that cost in greenhouse gas signature equivalents or whatever. But it could be other things. So to just raise awareness as we do projects, to be thinking about these things as we go forward, and to keep our rate increases down, be cognizant of what the cost of making these improvements, and do those at the right time when they fit in with things like the CIP. When we're doing we're already doing a capital improvement. So the incremental cost to put in these energy efficient measures at that point is it's a no-brainer at that point. Whereas if you're taking perfectly good equipment offline and doing that replacement, it's a lot bigger financial pill to swallow. So so the big strategies we've been trying to explore coming out of this was just the core takeaways would be to maximize our efficiency, both in consumption and our demand, to try and increase how much biogas energy we're getting, and to continue to explore additional clean energy sources. So next slide, Matt. So just looking back at this, the kind of the look back, how are we doing now? It's 2022 and we're looking back at this. Our feeling is that the current commission policy for staff is pretty clear. We've been applying the principles that came out of this policy, or out of this study. We've been applying them, I believe, responsibly, and trying to take that forward and continue to strive for improvements. We've learned that reducing our greenhouse gas signatures do take time. You can do it fast. It's going to cost you a lot more and be a lot more intrusive. Our approach has been is for the standpoint of work, a lot of facets we're trying to balance, a lot of different projects and interests we're trying to balance. So to keep continual progress over time, continuous improvement. Each of the, everything that we do takes a lot of thought, a lot of consideration. Where does it fit in the big scheme of things? And just to remain flexible, just so that we're constantly aware of new technologies or new opportunities that may arise. And I think the 2020 study certainly got into a number of things that weren't even on the table in 2014 that have become, either, a good example would be photovoltaic. It wasn't necessarily standing out in 2014, but the costs of those have come down considerably. So, and the interest in that has changed. So that has, that's a changing condition. And so being flexible to respond to things like that, there'll be other things coming forward. When we look at the next study down the road, it's going to be the same thing. We're going to have to continue to respond to things as they change on the ground. So with that, I'm going to hand it back off to Matt as we take us up to the current day. Thank you, Commissioner.
All right. So, excuse me. Just to kind of finish up things with the 2014 study, we just want to explain kind of the interim between that study and this current effort, the 2020 effort. So since the 2014 roadmap, we've had a lot of different projects. And what we're trying to tell you here is that the 2014 roadmap did not direct and dictate these projects, but the principles that Alan was just explaining were carried forward into these kinds of examples in other areas of the district work. So we're bringing forward the principles into all major district business. And the other thing to point out is in 2019, the commission went through some strategic planning discussions. And one of the things that emerged there was the commission indicated that infrastructure reliability and resilience was the top priority for the commission at that time. So that changed the focus for staff to begin thinking about energy more in terms of how do we have a reliable and resilient system? How do we have reliable and resilient energy sources? How do we produce our own energy reliably and keep our infrastructure going when it comes to having energy? So that all of that then informed the 2020 Energy Management Master Plan. So I've spoken to you about this plan in the past, so I'm going to fly at a pretty high level here and just remind you of a few things. But in summary, the 2020 study or plan can be viewed as a continuation of the 2014 roadmap. And really, we were intending to focus this effort on understanding how to improve our operational reliability and resilience in the face of seeing a lot of aging infrastructure needing attention. And so one of the gaps that this plan fills in that the 2014 roadmap didn't articulate as well was providing a more clear timeline and some estimated costs for dealing with our existing infrastructure in a more detailed way. So some of the big takeaways from this effort is that the district has more than one option going forward. This plan is not about providing the answer, it's about providing several answers for the district to consider in the future. And the good news is that each of these pathways delivers benefits to the district. So we have lots of options to do good things. And these pathways are focused on addressing the district's infrastructure needs. We're not identifying pet projects or things that are wants. These are things that the district will be required to do one way or the other to keep our operations going. And lastly, the commission previously directed staff to engage our owner communities on this study and understand their perspective. And so we did have a meeting with our owner communities back in December. Several commissioners were involved in that meeting, and we did not hear any kind of significant negative feedback or reservations. As you might expect, the one thing that we did hear was, concerns about costs and rates, but overall, their staff did not hear any significant concerns from our owner communities at that engagement point. And so this figure on the right, I presented this to you in the past, but what this is really showing is that, again, there are multiple options, multiple pathways that we could take. They all have benefits. Some have perhaps greater costs than others. And so again, this isn't about providing the district with the answer, but laying out some of the choices that we may be able to make in the future. And I would direct you to the executive summary that was attached to the commission agenda report for a little more context on that chart, or I'd be happy to answer questions about it at the end of this presentation. So next steps are kind of what Alan was talking about before. So we're going to continue to use the principles that were embodied in the 2014 roadmap throughout the normal course of business. So looking for energy efficiency improvements, looking for ways to reduce our environmental footprint when it comes to using and consuming energy. The next step from this study is to conduct facility planning to look at those pathway options that the plan lays out and further refine those options and understand which one is in the best interest of the district. And then once that facility planning has been completed, we'll move forward with design and construction projects to address our aging infrastructure needs. And one of the caveats there is you will see in future CIP discussions that we're not talking about doing everything at once. This will be a phased approach over a number of years. So the plan will be to develop these projects as aging infrastructure needs attention. We're not doing it all at once. And of course, the commission will be involved in all of these major milestones over time. So the facility planning efforts, how we lay out capital planning improvements, design and construction projects. So this isn't the last time you'll hear about this. So that leads us to the main point for today's discussion, which is we're asking you to accept the 2020 Energy Management Master Plan. This will allow us to formally complete the project and close work with our consultant. And perhaps more importantly, accepting this plan does not commit the district to anything at this point. It doesn't commit us to a certain strategy or a particular set of outcomes or policy around particular topics. Again, our intention is to maintain the principles embodied in the 2014 roadmap. And the last thing I'll mention is I believe there's a typo in the CAR that was provided to you. So the recommended option is to accept the plan. The secondary option, or option 1, contains the same language as the recommendation, but what that's meant to say, offer as an alternative, is to accept the plan, but then also request a deeper discussion at a future commission meeting around topics of interest to the commission. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Commissioner Hovell and Michael, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Matt and Alan, for your presentation and for your work on the energy master plan. Do any commission members have any questions before we get a motion? Grant?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the presentation. It was helpful to have the context of the previous work as well. I raised some questions last time we talked about this, and Michael and I have had a chance to talk about it as well. And maybe Michael, you could even just kind of share sort of high level around this, the kind of the question or topic of energy in the context of sort of sustainability, and what kind of like net zero goal might look like for the district, and options. Clearly that's wasn't the focus of this report, and I'm in favor of accepting this this plan. But I think to Matt's point of what additional work we want to see moving forward, that's one that really stands out for me, is just understanding our options and kind of the relative costs and benefits of investments in reducing energy use, investments in producing energy, renewable energy, and kind of how we what those options are, and figuring out if the commission does want to set some sort of goal and what a timeline would look like for that. So I don't know, Michael, if you have anything you could share about work that's already in progress or work that's planned, or how you think we could best get towards that question.
Thank you, Commissioner Foster. As you know, we have the commission's first study session on March 31st, and the focus of this first study session is really on level setting. And we're starting to combine these pieces of organizational performance and priorities and workload and all these pieces, and aligning them properly. And what we hope to get out of the March study session is a clear idea of the district's strategic purpose and why we exist, and what we provide to owners. And then identify, we're going to propose some performance areas or things we have to be really good at to deliver on that purpose. And that will be the point when we share that to see how energy fits in to that in terms of our performance, because our priorities and the things we invest in, they have to support our ability, our strategic purpose, and our performance areas. And so that meeting in March will be the first session where we share and lay out the approach that we've been developing since last fall. And the executive team is having 4 retreats to wrestle with all of this. And then coming out of that first study session, future study sessions will then start to work on what indicators we want to indicate how we measure success in these areas, what drivers, tasks, and projects we should perform. And so I would say that the first meeting is about getting all on the same page of how this all fits together. And then future study sessions with the commission will be around priority setting. And so that's how energy will be fit in and weighed against other priorities the district has. And so that's how we want to approach this.
That sounds good. And I mean, we can get more into that discussion then. You know, to me, it seems pretty clear that this is a critical question for us to answer, you know, sort of central to our goal of protecting environment and public health. I think the only thing I'll just, you know, I guess state in terms of accepting this plan right now is, you know, I appreciate the bullet that's in front of us right now. You know, this does not commit us to a particular strategy or set of outcomes or policy. You know, it'll be good to remind us or future commissions of that point, because I think it could be easy to sort of misread or interpret some of even, you know, just the grid that sort of shows alternatives, and some are kind of green and some are red, and a casual read of it could imply, you know, that there are certain paths that sort of make sense versus there are certain ones that are recommended. And I think particularly after we've had a chance to, you know, hopefully there's support from the rest of the commission around prioritizing this question of what is the district's role in net emissions and global warming. You know, hopefully that will be a really significant kind of not a formal addendum to this plan, but a lens that will help with future interpretation and decision making and prioritization. So I just want to emphasize, I guess, how critical that one is for me, and how closely aligned I think it is with the good work that's in this master plan. And hopefully we can start to get at that pretty soon, so that we can be a leader on this. We're a real significant energy user, and I'm hopeful that we can push ourselves to take the big steps to really be an example of what we can do regarding sustainability. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Grant. Ezra, you had your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I would real quick register, you know, total agreement with where Commissioner Foster is coming from on that direction forward. And of course that includes, you know, support for the direction that Matt talked about, where we turn next to facility planning to flesh out some of these pieces. But then there's that zooming out and sort of over to the greenhouse gas climate change implications of everything that we do, that I think is a key next step. I wanted to ask, relevant to this plan, to what extent MG&E has been involved, or could we go, if they haven't been involved to date, might it make sense for us to take this and present to their planning folks? I have to believe we're one of the larger single demands, you know, sources of demand in their service area. I don't know if that's exactly true, but I think I've heard that the district and the water utility are way up there in the top of that list. And as such, you know, we have some weight to throw around. We can and I think they'd be interested, as they plan for the future, to know where some of their largest, you know, demand users are headed with their planning. So it seems to me like there's a really good synergy in engaging pretty closely with them on what we're thinking. But I just wonder if that's happened or if that could happen going forward.
I'll field that one, Michael, if that's all right. The short answer is yes, we have engaged them in the context of this study. One of the key recommendations of the plan is to consider MG&E's Renewable Energy Rider program and take a look at a partnership around a large-scale solar project that would be constructed on district-owned property. So that is a next step that we will likely be looking at in the future. We've also been having some discussions with MG&E around backup power solutions for the plant, because right now there's some gray area there. And of course, we also engage with MG&E on an annual or semi-annual basis in general, because we are one of their key customers. So we are communicating with them on these kinds of topics.
That's great. Yeah, we're one of their largest customers, and they're one of our largest cost centers on the operations side of our whole operation, right? I mean, so there's a lot that makes sense there. Thanks, Matt. That helps a lot. I'm glad to hear it and appreciate that.
Okay, is anybody else?
I'm happy to move approval of the resolution as proposed to accept the work on this plan and put it to bed, as it were.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Meyer to approve the resolution accepting the 2020 Energy Management Master Plan. Do we have a second?
I'll second it and look forward to our future discussions around this issue. Thank
Okay,
you.
so we have a motion by Commissioner Meyer, second by Commissioner Murphy. Any further discussion? I think I have some comments I want to make, but I think I'm going to reserve those for when we get to the overall thing. You know, there's a number of individual decisions that come into a play, and you know, the district can have some input in those, and other places it can't, because it's responding to various communities and how they grow and what they do. Okay, so we have the motion and the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, gentlemen, for all your hard work. Motion carried. For some reason, my mic went off for a little bit. My cursor accidentally moved down. Okay, so we'll take on to the Chief Engineer and Director's report. Michael?
Thank you, President Hubble. I have two brief reports for you today. With regard to COVID, the good news is that COVID cases are declining nationally in Dane County and here at the district among staff. With this news in mind, we in our Emergency Management Committee have discussed allowing staff to return to the plant and hybrid work arrangements, and to what we were doing before Omicron started surging. And barring any new surges or guidance from Public Health Madison Dane County that may prevent us from returning to the office, we are targeting Monday, February 28th as the day staff may begin returning to the office and hybrid work arrangements. We will still remain closed to the public and tours, and we'll continue to maintain some restrictions on large group meetings. We are encouraged, though, that our commission study session in late March, we will be able to do in person. And we're very excited about that. And where, you know, in December, that was uncertain. So I think as commissioners, we're hopefully moving towards an in-person study session. And I look forward to a reunion of sorts. It's been 2 years since we've all been in the same room together, and it'll be a bit of a celebration, and it'll be good to start working together in person. And I hope that comes to fruition. The second thing is I along with the two other executive directors for the large wastewater utilities in the state, that would be Green Bay and Milwaukee, have been meeting with DNR staff regarding the infrastructure bill. And we had a meeting in December, and we just had our second meeting last week. And what we've learned since December is nothing new has materialized since that time. And there is still a lot of speculation at this point. The DNR is still waiting for EPA guidance, and which is expected to be received by the end of this month. We are also waiting to see what will be required for the Buy American provision, which could have a major impact on sourcing material and on our costs in bids. It appears that any Buy American provisions will not be retroactive to projects already bid, and the DNR is developing a waiver process, or at least considering a waiver process. One interesting note is that private property I&I is being considered for funding also by the DNR, although this will require changes to state statutes. DNR Secretary Cole has signaled an interest in pursuing this change in statutes. And so we're waiting to see what DNR leadership does in this regard, but that could be a major win for us if that would be allowed on multiple levels. The focus for the funding from the bill continues to be providing as much funding and resources as possible to disadvantaged communities. And the DNR is evaluating how you define disadvantaged. The traditional way is looking at median household income, but they're looking at other potential metrics such as percent poverty level in an area and other metrics to be able to evaluate that, to assure that dollars from this bill go to where it is needed most. Workforce development funding is still a mystery. I keep asking the DNR about this because it's something that with all of this work and continuing to have a workforce of the future, funding that we could utilize to develop our workforce could be extremely beneficial. And there really doesn't seem to be any answers yet on that, but I'm keeping my finger on that one as something to watch and to continue to encourage DNR. We are meeting again with the DNR in March, and I'll have more to report after that time. So with that, President Hubble, that concludes my report, and I'll see if there's any questions by the commission.
Okay, Ezra, you have a question?
Just a quick comment, Michael. I was struck by the thought that on that last part about workforce, which is so important, thinking about how, as this huge amount of dollars flows out all across the country, right, for water infrastructure and all the other kinds of infrastructure too, how the workforce locally in all places, Milwaukee, Madison, et cetera, is going to meet that. It strikes me that connecting with workforce development at the state agency level, in addition to DNR, and see if there's any room for those two to work together and be coordinating BWD efforts that might help provide that pipeline and build up the capacity there to meet these needs when the projects start to roll out. Just something to think about. Like you and Paul both, run in those circles and may be able to connect with some other state agencies that have a lot to say about that workforce side of things as well. Milwaukee MMSD and a whole host of partners in the community and sort of nonprofit level have a water equity task force that does a lot of looking into that issue in detail over there. So Kevin Schaefer is a great contact on that as well. He may have some of those connections at the state agency level already, but good thought. I'm glad you're thinking about both dimensions there at the same time, and hopefully the state will be doing the same.
Okay, thanks, Ezra. Michael, I have a couple comments. Do you have any idea when you're going to start transitioning? Because now that we have this artist, educator, and residence, it seems to me that some of those things are best done hand in hand. So have you come up with a roadmap as to when you expect the district to start opening to people? And my other comment is, I know we've kind of tied our meetings to the mask mandate, but I think given the March meeting, if the mask mandate's still in effect, we should probably evaluate whether or not we're comfortable meeting in person for that March. I think it'd be preferable to have that meeting in person. I think we can get more, possibly even if the mask mandate's still in effect. But I guess it depends on what case counts and everything you're doing at that time too. So that's just my thoughts. But I was wondering if you have any idea of roadmap for opening now that we have artists in residence, more to the public.
Well, it's our roadmap we're taking with opening to the public. We do not have a date yet on that, and in terms of people coming back into the district. But we are observing large group standards that are established by Dane County Public Health. So when we do have, meetings, that we are meeting all the health and safety standards on that.
Okay, do you have any metrics as to what it takes to do that? To get back open? I mean, is it zero cases? I don't know.
Mike Lipsky has been leading our emergency management team. And Mike, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the metrics that we're monitoring. If he's still on this call, he may not be, but that would be something I could follow back with the commission on in a future meeting as well, what those metrics are, because I don't have the answer for you right at this point.
Okay, Mike, did you have any thoughts?
Hi, at this point, we've really been focused on trying to get the employees back. We did have conversations in emergency management team about the reopening to the public last fall. And then, with Omicron, that's really impacted things. So I think that's something that we'll definitely be revisiting at our emergency management teams going forward, because we're still meeting every other week. Definitely we'll be able to tackle that in March.
I just didn't know if any guidelines were set as to what you do when, based on certain metrics, case counts, or whatever guidance. Okay, Grant?
Yeah, thanks. Good discussion. One thing I just want to put out there as we're thinking about this, and I'm sure it'll come up in the staff conversations, but even as a sort of public, if there's a change to the public health order, or if there are no public health orders, related to use of mask, I'm guessing there will probably still be public health recommendations around, practices, et cetera. And I think just focused on the commission meetings, as we talk about coming back, we should probably also just talk about that, because I think many businesses or other organizations may still have internal policies around expectations for mask usage or other things that aren't, the public health order is sort of a minimum bar. But I think it'd be a good conversation as we, to fold into a conversation about coming back in person, is if there is no mask mandate, do we want to have any expectations or guidelines around mask use or other items, for those meetings, both for commissioners, members of the public, et cetera. So just something to bring into that conversation, and perhaps some of the work that staff is doing can help inform that as well, as you think about the same for employees or visitors. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. That will take us to the regulatory and legal report. Paul?
Good morning. I'm having a few problems with my headset, so hopefully this comes through okay. My report's fairly brief, and it really, the things coming up relate to PFAS. There's a technical advisory committee coming up on February 18th, but the big news is that the 3 rules for groundwater, drinking water, and surface water are coming before the DNR board on February 23rd. So depending upon what happens there, we'll have a sense of whether these rules will continue on to legislative review, or whether the process will need to start over. So we'll be monitoring that closely. Otherwise, everything else has kind of been on the back burner while the department is focused on these issues. But I'd be glad to entertain any additional questions that people might have.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Paul? Okay, thank you, Paul. Future meeting schedule, that's in the packet. And then the future agenda topics, we talked about a couple of those issues today. The truck or fleet vehicles being one, and electrification, and then the energy. And then any other business? If not,
Commissioner Hubble, sorry.
go ahead.
Sorry to prolong this meeting. One future agenda topic, it's not on our calendar yet, but something I want you to be aware of, and it touches on something Commissioner Meyer brought up earlier about availability of workforce, and not only that, our ability to get work done here at the district. You may recall last year, Todd Giebert, when we presented our CIP, indicated a pretty big gap between the critical projects we need to get done, infrastructure projects we need to get done, and our ability to get them done. And we weren't staffed, and that would require some staffing up to get those projects done. And one of our goals that was in the budget for this year was to do a staffing plan to figure out what that's going to take. Kathy Wunderlich, our Director of Engineering, has performed that evaluation, and to meet our critical path timeline on some of these projects is going to require the authorization of some new staff this year. And I'll be placing that on a future agenda very soon with the commission to get that authorization. So we're sorting through that now, but I didn't want to surprise the commission with that, and just let you know that's going to be coming.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, anybody else have anything? I don't see anything. Tom? You still? Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn? I think Tom left.
I would make that motion. Commissioner
Okay.
Clark.
Commissioner Clark, motion to adjourn, second by?
I'll second it. Murphy.
Second by Commissioner Murphy. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Take care, everybody.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Aye.